The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete courtyard of the Lone Star Veterans Home in Austin. Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez adjusted his dress blue uniform one final time, the weight of his medals catching the afternoon light. At 28, he had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, but today felt more nerve-wracking than any combat mission he'd ever faced. "You ready for this, Rodriguez?" asked his commanding officer, Colonel James Parker, as they approached the main entrance of the nursing home. The building stood like a fortress of memories, its red brick facade weathered by decades of Texas heat and the stories of countless warriors who had found their final posting here. "As ready as I'll ever be, sir," Michael replied, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his chest. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but nothing could prepare him for what lay ahead. The ceremony was routine, a monthly tradition where active duty soldiers from nearby Fort Hood would visit the veterans' home to honor the elderly warriors who had paved the way. But for Michael, this wasn't just another ceremonial duty. This was the culmination of a 20-year search that had consumed his life. As they entered the air-conditioned lobby, the familiar scent of antiseptic mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from the cafeteria. Wheelchairs lined the hallways, each occupied by a man whose eyes held the weight of battles fought on foreign soil. Some wore their old unit patches on civilian clothes. Others clutched folded American flags in their weathered hands. "The ceremony will begin in the main recreation room," explained Mrs. Sandra Williams, the facilities director. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes that had seen too many final goodbyes. "We have 43 residents participating today. Most are Vietnam veterans, but we also have some Korean War veterans and a few from the Gulf War." Michael's heart raced. Somewhere in this building was the man he'd been searching for since he was 8 years old. The day his mother, Maria Rodriguez, had finally told him the truth about his father on her deathbed. She had been a young waitress at a diner near Fort Hood in 1995 when she met Sergeant First Class David Thompson, a tank commander preparing for deployment to Bosnia. "He was the most honorable man I ever met," she had whispered, her voice weak from the cancer that was stealing her away. "But he never knew about you, Mijo. I was too scared to tell him before he left, and then I heard he was wounded, badly wounded. I thought it was better this way." The recreation room buzzed with quiet conversation as the veterans took their seats. Michael scanned the faces, looking for the features his mother had described. Steel gray eyes, a scar above the left eyebrow from a training accident, and hands that always seemed to be in motion, a nervous habit from his tank days. Colonel Parker took the podium, his voice carrying across the room with military precision. "Gentlemen, we gather here today to honor your service and sacrifice. Your legacy lives on in every soldier who wears this uniform." As the colonel continued his speech, Michael's eyes stopped on a man in the third row. He was in his 60s, his hair silver white, sitting rigidly upright in his wheelchair despite the obvious effort it required. His left leg was missing below the knee, and his hands, those restless hands his mother had described, fidgeted with a small American flag. Staff Sergeant David Thompson. It had to be him. The man's eyes met Michael's across the room, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. There was no recognition, just the polite acknowledgement of one soldier to another. But Michael saw it. The same stubborn jawline he glimpsed in the mirror every morning, the same way of holding his shoulders that had made his drill sergeant comment on his natural military bearing. And now, Colonel Parker announced, "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez will present the ceremonial flag to honor your service." Michael stepped forward, his legs feeling like lead. This was it, the moment he had planned for, dreamed of, and feared in equal measure. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "He deserves to know, Mijo, but you have to be prepared that he might not want to know." The room fell silent as Michael approached the wheelchair. David Thompson looked up, his gray eyes curious but guarded. Up close, Michael could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, exactly where his mother had described it. "Thank you for your service, sir," Michael said, his voice barely steady as he prepared to render a salute that would change both their lives forever. The old soldier's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Michael's face with an intensity that made the younger man's breath catch. Something flickered in those gray depths. A question, a possibility, a ghost of recognition that couldn't quite surface. Michael raised his hand slowly, deliberately, his fingers coming together in the crisp salute he had perfected over a decade of military service. But as his hand reached his temple, he spoke the words that would shatter the careful walls he had built around his heart. "Sergeant First Class Thompson, it's an honor to finally meet you, sir." The old soldier's face went pale, his restless hands suddenly still. The flag trembled in his grip as the weight of the name, a name he hadn't heard in years, crashed over him like a wave. "How do you?" David's voice cracked, his eyes searching Michael's face with desperate intensity. Michael held the salute, his own eyes filling with tears he had sworn he wouldn't shed. "My mother was Maria Rodriguez, sir. She worked at Danny's Diner outside Fort Hood in 1995. The room around them seemed to disappear as 28 years of separation collapsed into a single moment. David Thompson's wheelchair seemed to shrink beneath him as the full impact of Michael's words hit home. "Maria," he whispered, the name falling from his lips like a prayer. "Oh God, Maria." The salute stretched between them like a bridge across decades of silence. David Thompson's weathered hands trembled as he struggled to process what he was hearing. Around them, the recreation room had fallen into a respectful hush, though neither man was aware of anything beyond the space they shared. "Maria," David repeated, his voice stronger now, filled with a mixture of wonder and pain. "I looked for her after I got back from Bosnia. The diner was closed, and nobody knew where she'd gone." His eyes never left Michael's face as he spoke. I was in the hospital for 8 months. When I finally got out, I tried to find her, but..." Michael slowly lowered his salute, the formal gesture complete, but its impact would last forever. "She moved to San Antonio after she found out she was pregnant. She worked 2 jobs to raise me alone, sir. She never forgot you." The old soldier's hands went to his wheelchair's armrests, his knuckles white with the effort of holding himself steady. "Pregnant," he whispered. "She was pregnant, and I never knew. She wanted to tell you, but she heard about your injuries through the base grapevine. She thought you had enough to deal with." Michael's voice was gentle, understanding. "She made me promise to find you someday, to tell you that you had a son." David's eyes filled with tears he hadn't shed since his evacuation from a bombed-out village in Bosnia. "A son," he said, the words seeming to echo in the quiet room. "I have a son, Colonel Parker." Recognizing the profound nature of what was unfolding, quietly gestured for the other soldiers to continue the ceremony with the remaining veterans. The formal proceedings continued around them, but Michael and David existed in their own world now. "What was she like?" David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maria, what was she like as a mother?" Michael pulled a plastic chair over and sat down, bringing himself to eye level with his father. "She was incredible, sir. She taught me about honor, about serving something bigger than myself. She's the reason I enlisted. She used to tell me stories about you, about how you carried yourself, how you treated everyone with respect regardless of their rank. She remembered that." David's voice cracked. "She remembered everything, Dad." The words slipped out naturally, and both men felt its weight. "She kept a photo of you in your dress uniform on her dresser until the day she died. She said you were the most honorable man she ever met." David closed his eyes, letting the tears fall freely now. "I should have tried harder to find her. I should have." "No, sir," Michael interrupted gently. "You were recovering from injuries that would have killed a lesser man. You served your country with honor, and that's what matters. Mom always said that." The old soldier opened his eyes, studying his son's face with the intensity of someone memorizing every detail. "You look like her," he said finally, "but you have my stubborn jaw." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "And apparently my sense of duty." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Colonel Parker approached quietly. "If you need to take some time." "Thank you, sir," Michael replied, never taking his eyes off his father. "If that's possible." "Of course. Take all the time you need." As the ceremony continued around them, father and son talked. David spoke about his years in the Army, about the tank crew that had become his family, about the IED that had taken his leg, but not his spirit. Michael shared stories about growing up, about his mother's strength, about his own military service, and the pride he felt wearing the same uniform his father had worn. "She died 2 years ago," Michael said quietly. "Cancer. At the end, she made me promise to find you and tell you the truth. She said you deserve to know that something good came from your time at Fort Hood." David reached out with a shaking hand, touching Michael's arm for the first time. "Something good," he repeated. "Son, you're not just something good. You're everything I never knew I wanted." The afternoon sun was setting through the recreation room windows, painting the walls in shades of gold and amber. Other veterans had begun to disperse, but a few remained, watching the reunion with the understanding that only old soldiers could possess. "I want to know everything," David said, his voice stronger now. "Every birthday I missed, every Christmas, every moment of your life. I want to know about your mother's last days, about your deployments, about the man you've become." Michael smiled, truly smiled for the first time in months. "I have pictures, sir, and stories. So many stories. And I want to hear them all," David replied. "But first, I need to ask you something." He straightened in his wheelchair, his military bearing returning. Do you think you could visit an old soldier again? Maybe not in uniform next time, just as my son." Michael's throat tightened with emotion. "I'd like that, Dad. I like that very much." As the Texas sun set behind the veteran's home, two soldiers, separated by decades and circumstance, but united by blood and honor, began the long journey of becoming father and son. The salute that had brought them together was over, but the relationship it had forged would last the rest of their lives. Mrs. Williams approached them quietly as the room began to empty. "Visiting hours are until 8 on weekdays," she said with a knowing smile. "Just in case you were wondering. I'll be back tomorrow," Michael promised, standing to leave. "If that's okay with you, sir." David Thompson, Staff Sergeant, United States Army, looked up at his son with pride shining in his steel-gray eyes. "It's more than okay, son. It's perfect." As Michael walked away, he could hear his father's voice behind him. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez?" Michael turned back. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for being worth finding, sir." The ceremony was over, but their story as father and son was just beginning.